Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Born to Succeed podcast, the number one podcast on the planet for helping you succeed on both a personal and professional level, where every podcast we bring you motivation, inspiration, faith, hope, and love, and we remind you that you are born to succeed. Welcome back to the Born to Succeed podcast with Michael and Elisa Merritt, the number one podcast on the planet for helping you succeed on both the personal and professional level. We are so blessed today to have the legendary Larry Roberts on the podcast with us today.
Yeah! Man, no pressure there. No pressure.
So, guys, if you don't know the legendary Larry Roberts, we're going to give you a lot about him here in just a minute. But I want to say he's an author, he's a speaker, podcasting extraordinaire. He's a content creator. Man, this guy has just got it going on. So, Mr. Larry, without further ado, welcome to the show, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing better now that I'm here talking to y'all. So this is great. Awesome. I appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah. So tell us about yourself, man. What do you do? I know the podcasting and all that, but tell us about what you are, what your passion's about.
Man, I tell you, my passion right now, honestly, is about podcasting. That is exactly what I do. But, you know, it was an interesting road to get where we're at today. And
right.
Truth be told, I was a corporate guy up until January 4th of this year. And that's when I finally said, you know what, this podcast thing, it's where it's at. And I stepped away. And so I've been doing it full time now for 10 months. And I tell you, this year it's been amazing. It's been amazing. And I can't wait to see what next year brings.
Right.
Yeah. Now, the name of your podcast is?
Name of the podcast is You're the Boss. You're going, what? I thought it was readily random. So let me tell you, we are going, and we've got the artwork. We're just about there. So going forward, it's going to be You're the Boss, and we're going to do a soft launch in the next couple of weeks. So I don't know when this episode's going to drop, but by the time it drops, I'm sure we'll have the soft launch already in place. And then come the first of the year, we're going to have a hardcore launch party, and we're going to make it big. So looking forward to that.
Nice. So, and you've been doing this for a long time. You had a podcast before this one that you have now called Readily Random, going to You're the Boss, but you had a podcast before, right?
Yeah, I started, my first podcast was a comedy podcast because, truth be told, I never listened to podcasts before. And about 8 years ago, coming up here in about 2 weeks, I don't really celebrate, but I at least acknowledge my eighth year of sobriety. So I went into rehab back in 2013. And shortly after that, after recovery, I was looking for something to do. I needed something creative. I needed an outlet. And I always loved comedy. And a friend of mine introduced me to the Joe Rogan Podcast. And it just happened to be that he had a couple of other comedians on there. And what I heard blew me away because, I'm a kid from the 80s.
Right.
And I was like, these comedians are saying the same stuff that they said. These guys are awesome, and I want to do this. So I jumped in there, man. I kicked off a podcast, and, it did really well. The content was somewhat questionable, a little blue, but, it launched several things. One of the longest running open mics in the DFW Metroplex outside of a comedy club is still running today at Hat Tricks here in Louisville. And we kicked that off by taking the podcast to a live stage show there. My co-host,
that's awesome.
Thank you so much. And my co-host of that show, he now works in Vegas, opening for Eddie Griffin at the New Sahara. And it all started with a podcast. So, he went to the next level. He took it to the next level for sure.
Yeah. Now, we were lucky to meet you, Larry, at this mastermind dinner that we went to with Mr. Kevin Castillo, the Dinner of Impactors, right?
Yes.
That was a great event, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I got to be honest, it was a little awkward at first because I didn't know Kevin. Kevin knows a mutual friend of ours, and she suggested that I go to this mastermind dinner. And I thought, you know what the heck? I need to meet some people. I need to get out there, get in the Metroplex a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
So I went, and little did I know that dates were welcome or wives were welcome, right? And it was a lot bigger than what I thought it was going to be. So here I am all by myself, and I'm wearing my monkey suit. I got a jacket on and a collared shirt, and I'm trying to fit in. So, yeah, it was a little awkward. But you know what? I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to sit across from you two and engage in some conversation. And if it wasn't for y'all, man, I don't know if I'd have made it through the night, because y'all at least helped put me at ease and make me feel somewhat like I belong there. So that
I know
was great.
you kept cracking me up saying, I'm texting my wife telling her to get on over here. Wives are welcome. I'm texting my wife. But you're like a kindred spirit to me, because you remind me of a guy I grew up with who's actually on the radio. It's the Ben and Skin show. But your personality, you just remind me of him so much. So I was like, I feel like you're already like a brother. And then being in the podcasting world, and that's the world that we're growing in as well. And it was just all exciting. The conversation that we held at the dinner was great.
Yeah,
it was a great night. I can't wait for the next one. I know Kevin's got one that's coming up again. I think it's in January, if memory serves me right. So I'll be there for that one as well.
Nice. Now, you got a business called Podcast Boost, right? Is that correct?
Podcast Boost it's a product and a service that I offer as part of Readily Random Media. Readily Random Media is the company. Not going to change. That'll always be around. Just the name of the podcast is changing. But Podcast Boost is a service that I provide where I help people either launch a new podcast, or I help companies launch branded podcasts. Or if you already have a podcast, we can take a look at it, do a bit of an audit, and see, what exactly you have going on. We'll talk about what goals that you have and see what we can do together to help you reach those goals.
Gotcha. Great. Yeah, that sounds like something that we need.
Yeah, it's something that's much needed podcast. Because I think people jump out there and then they're just like, well, wait, it's not happening for me. I don't really understand. I'm doing exactly what Joe's doing. But there are probably some tips and tricks of the trade.
Well, he was famous before he jumped on the podcast. That's one of the
found out that have helped, right?
Oh, tremendously. And a lot of folks have what I like to call Joe Rogan delusions of grandeur, thinking that they can start a podcast and they're going to be rocking the airwaves from then on. But there's a huge difference there. The convenience about podcasting is that it is a very, very low barrier of entry. Anybody can start a podcast.
Right.
But doing a podcast in a way that's going to reach an audience that you're trying to reach, or a bigger audience, or achieve whatever your individual podcasting goals are, takes a little more thought, takes a little more planning, and takes a lot more effort.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, going to that boost and reaching that value, right? Creating that value versus just kind of getting on and saying a few things, giving that value to you. Yeah. So what hobbies do you do outside of podcasting and all that, man? I know you're married and all that, but what are your hobbies? What do you do?
I am married, and I have two little pups. Those are my babies. I got actually two kids. My daughter, she's 29. My son is 26. I got two grandbabies, but let's keep that on the DL. Don't nobody need to know that I'm a grandpa, all right? So don't want that getting out. But no, I mean, I am an old school fight fan, man. I grew up in the 90s, and all through that time, I taught karate. I owned my own karate school for a while, and even dipped my toes into some, we'll call it semi-pro fighting. Did a little MMA or UFC type stuff back in the day before it was very, very popular. I think I had my first MMA fight like in 94. 95 maybe. So here in Texas, we had some very unique rules. They didn't allow the real deal type mixed martial arts that you see today. We had to do slap fights back then. It was called pancration, and you couldn't hit anybody with a closed fist. You could only hit them with open hands. So we look back on those fondly, talking about the old school Texas slap fights. That's what we were doing. So. But I don't get on the mat anymore. I'm way too old, way too fat for that. But I'm still attached to the sport. Still got a lot of friends in the sport, and I like to live vicariously through their careers.
Nice. Anything else that you dabble in, play with, take your mind off the mental game?
Yeah, you know what, man? As pathetic as this sounds, I eat, live, breathe, sleep podcasting. I mean, I'm the editor-in-chief for one of the largest podcasting companies out there for their newsletter called the Podfest Messenger. So that comes out twice a week. So if I'm not looking for stories or looking for content or highlighting other podcasters in the Messenger, I'm creating content of my own, or I'm helping others create content. Or, you know, just the other day, I visited a mutual friend of ours, Jeff Crilly, and went down and toured his studios and looking to put some plans together for You're the Boss. We might be kind of stepping our game up a little bit there.
I mean, we did an interview with him. It's a nice interview. He's a nice guy, right? And a nice studio.
It's just amazing. And, you know, he's got another studio that's not far from the house, and over in Allen, as a matter of fact. I think it's Allen. Is it Allen?
The one that's right there in Dallas in the Lincoln Tower. I didn't know he had a second studio. Does he have a second one as well?
He's got one over at the Grandscape. That's the Colony. I'm sorry. Here I am talking North Texas. So if you're listening to this and you're not from North Texas, you're not going to know what I'm saying. But he's got another studio that's a whole lot closer to home base for old Lair. So I'm thinking about heading over there and upping our game in that arena. So, but that's it, man. I honestly, I do watch TV. I do love me some Ted Lasso. I'm a huge Ted Lasso fan. And if you can't tell behind me, you know, it's a little blurry because of the background, but I love my anything Batman. I'm a bat freak. So I'm sitting here right now. I'm building a Lego Batmobile from like 1989, the Michael Keaton version. And it's over 2 feet long. So it's got, I don't know, several thousand pieces to it. So every Sunday I step back Sunday afternoon and I spend, I don't know, 2 to 3 hours putting some Lego pieces together, just to kind of chill out a little bit, you know, and take my mind off of it. So just stuff like that. Just have a good time.
That is one of the things I remembered I was going to ask you about the Legos. That's what I remember, because I remember you talking about that at the dinner, and you talking about these gigantic 3,000 pieces. I was like, what? Oh my gosh, man. You're like, I love it, man. I got to put these huge pieces together. I'm like, I love it.
Which ironically, you know, because we grew up in the 80s as well, so we won't have to say how old we are. But, you know, we found ourselves putting together some puzzles, some, you know, more complicated puzzles, and just some other things just where you don't have to think about anything, because you are going all day long, like you said, creating or actually implementing. And so you're always taking action, you're always moving forward. And you have to have those times of break. You have to live that balanced life.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, so we were over at Jeff Crilly for an interview there, and that's what I was going to ask you about. How'd the interview go, and how would you like the studio? Because we found it just smashing. I was like, you know, once we can get our podcast to that level and get some sponsorships, and, you know, that's what we're going to do. We're going to walk in, have it produced. Yeah, your podcast is ready the next day. Sweet. Thanks.
100%. That's the only way to fly. And you know,
awesome.
I came home and I told my wife about it. It was a great afternoon. Of course, I was nervous as all get out going down there, because I mean he owns Real News PR, and this is like a real PR firm in Dallas, Texas. I mean, this is the real deal. This is a big city town. You know, I'm from Denison, Texas, which is just a little small town on the border of Texas and Oklahoma. So coming down to the big city back in my 20s, I just knew I was going to be living in a skyrise, but I never made it down that far. So now it's still pretty amazing to get down into the city and get into these big buildings, and there's a bit of a shock value there for me. Yeah. So getting down there, I was nervous as all get out, but man, when I got in there, like you say, Jeff he's just super nice. And as I was touring the studios, it's just amazing to go into the various sets and to see everything that he's got going on. It was a little slice of heaven on earth for old Lair, that's for sure. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, all his people are great, and he's like, just come out in the afternoon and just hang out. I mean, you know, we just gather and talk and network. You know, we're just like, well, we can't come every day, but we'll definitely be coming.
We actually went like 4 times, because we went for a Beyond Publishing global event for our publisher and our book, and then we went a second day, and then we went for a Jeff Crilly, and then we went back for another red carpet event. So we were actually in the Oprah studio 3 times, and then
that's cool.
So every time we went back, we're like, it's like home, man. You know, like she said, Jeff was like, just come and hang out anytime during the day. We're like, well, we have jobs. Like, we can't just come hang out at the studio. I mean, like, if you want to sponsor our podcast, we'd love to do that, Jeff. I mean, you know, whatever you say, you know, but just a great bunch of people down there for sure, right? We met a bunch of people that were great connections, and And we actually still have been going back and forth on Facebook, etc. Some of the folks we met. So it was a great setup for sure. We're like, that is definitely the way to go. Talk about one and done. We'll walk in, get it done. We'll walk out. That's nice.
Yeah. And I did another podcast on one of his smaller studios with just the little 2-seat. I don't remember exactly if the room was green or what color the room was, but it was just 2 seats with a nice desk. And and it was just a separate podcast, but it wasn't Jeff, but it was nice.
Yeah. Another global publishing author. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just an amazing setup. And anytime as a content creator, you have that opportunity to experience creating in a new environment, but not just a new environment, a step up, a level up, because we all sit here as creators. My studio's at my house. I took a room and converted it to a studio. And although this feels pretty legit most of the time, when you go down and you get into a studio, it kind of takes your breath away a little bit,
Yeah.
Yep.
I did voice acting before I got into podcasting as well. So I had spent some time in studios doing my demos and doing a couple of jobs here and there. Right. But seeing something like that Jeff's got it's just next level. It's really amazing, and it's inspiring, and it makes you want to do better.
Right, exactly. I remember when we were getting ready, and they were like counting it down, and the guy comes over and he's like, "Do you mind if I put a little powder on you?" And I'm like, "Oh no! If I need some powder, I'll take you some powder." So I thought, this is really like Hollywood here. Give me some powder. Let me practice before I go on.
Yeah,
that's too funny because there's a
studio, and you're like, now I know why it's so nice. Oh my goodness, yikes! Yeah,
it's the real deal.
Into it. Yeah.
It's funny because there's a picture of Jeff and I as we're sitting there before we go live, and I'm showing all these pictures for the day to my wife. She goes, "What is he holding?" And in his left hand, there's a compact, and in his right hand, there's a makeup brush.
Yeah.
So I go, I say, he was getting this camera ready, honey. You just get this going.
Yeah. Yes, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Super great guy. Great experience, no doubt. Now, do you have a book out as well, brother? Are you writing a book? Do you have a book out already?
I do have a book out. It's called 1 + 1 = Podcast, which is just a simple introduction to podcasting. I wrote it about 3 years ago, so I probably wrote it before I even knew what the heck I was writing. But it's out there. It's on Amazon. It did hit #1 in several different categories over the years. So I am in the midst of revising it and coming out with an updated edition. So that's going to be taking place as part of the new launch. I also just hired a company to completely revamp my website. So I signed that contract last week. So big things are happening in the Readily Random Media studios. I'm pretty excited about everything. So
awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, I had all those different things written down from Jeff Crilly and all those different things. And I was like, I got to try to get these in here, man. I got to try to get them in. So, man, we appreciate you. One of the things I always ask for our guests, is how can we promote you, So what are the things that you want our listeners to hear and to be able to go? And I'll put all this in the description of the notes anyway.
Sure.
How they can reach you and services, things like that.
And they get to the next level.
Yeah, exactly. They can always take it to the next level by going to readilyrandom.com. And, right now it's not the most, I'm not the most proud of the site, but it's coming. I think it's going to be probably middle of February before the new site's live, but it's in progress now. So readilyrandom.com is all things podcasting, and you can find me on every social media outlet, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook. I'm very active on Facebook. I guess that's part of my demographic. It shows my age because I hang out there. Have the hardest time switching over there to that Instagram. So
I know it. My kids try to get me on Snapchat, and I'm like, I don't need to be Snapchatting with you. I'd send you text of life lessons, and that's what it's good for. I don't really, Facebook I use a lot for memories and different things like that. But yeah, they're definitely trying to get you on Instagram.
The demographics, right? The kids are on TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram, and we're over here on Facebook. Like, I don't want a TikTok.
Exactly. I don't dance. Okay, I don't dance. But I know TikTok is a very valuable platform, and it's valuable for a lot of podcasters as well.
Right.
I know. I tried it once. I don't know, when did it start coming on the scene? About a year ago or so. I tried it, and I was doing daily affirmations. And the only person that I was affirming was myself. So it failed miserably. Nobody was watching the vids. I couldn't figure it out. I'm just like, I'm too old for this or whatever.
Right.
I have every intention of trying it again, though. I'm not gonna let it get me down.
That's right. That's right. We were just talking about this morning. Like, okay, what all platforms do we need to get on? Where do we need to actually focus? You know, what are the high points? So we did visit those this morning: TikTok, Instagram, and talking about what's the next step.
Talking with somebody the other day, and they're like, Mike, especially being a coach and life coach and all that, you need to be on LinkedIn hard. LinkedIn.
And that's exactly what I would think. Yeah, that's exactly what I would think.
He was like, that's got to be your number one platform. It's got to be LinkedIn. You got to concentrate on that. Yes, Facebook, but LinkedIn, business professional. You're not on IG. You're not 20. If you were, you'd be on IG, on Instagram, or as he said, TikTok or Snapchat. And he was like, but you got to aim at LinkedIn as far as coaching and all the business side. So it is amazing how each platform is totally different, and the demographics and the age are there for sure.
See, and I think that might be a problem that a lot of us as creators have in trying to get people to engage with our content, is we're trying to be too many things to too many different people.
Right.
You specifically bring up LinkedIn because you're a life coach, and that's where you're going to find professionals that most likely want your services.
Right.
And I think that's what we lose sight of. We lose sight of where is our audience. And that's our biggest struggle. And instead of going to the most likely places that would have our audience, we find ourselves going all over the place and really to no one. And it's a hard lesson to learn, because you always feel like you're missing out. If only I was over here, I might get one more listener. I might get 2 more downloads, or I might get another client. But I often wonder if the I mights outpower the I cans, or I woulds if I was in the right place.
Right.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that comes from, not having the knowledge. I think that's why we get with somebody like Larry Roberts that says, hey, man, you trying to take your podcast? Let me give you this expertise that I have. That's what we'll say thing with life coach. Why does somebody need a life coach? Because we're going to teach you some of the things that you don't know, and give you some direction, and give you a point, and give you from A to B. And I think a lot of times people are just trying to hit that on their own, just like we do. We're just trying to throw one out here and here and here and here, and realizing it's not really reaching like we thought. We got to really concentrate on specific market. And like you said, repel those that don't want us and attract those that do, and don't worry about the ones that don't, because, hey, that wasn't meant to be our customer. That's somebody else's thing.
It wasn't your audience in the first place. So if they're not engaging with your content, they weren't for you in the first place. But there are plenty of people out there that are. And it's knowing that, for instance, with a podcast, it's knowing who your audience is. Can you draw a picture of your ideal listener? What do they look like? Where are they from? What's their economic status? What's their educational level? What are their goals in life? I mean, a friend of mine that's also a creator and coach, he's got like 88 questions that he asked to define an avatar or your ideal listener. And I'm like, man, 88, like, bruh, I ain't answering 88 questions. This is not going to, but let's answer 20. Let's answer 10. Answer some, just get an idea of who your ideal listener is, which for most of us, and at least that use it as a business tool, most of us are looking for ideal clients. So if we can identify that ideal client through that ideal listener, we'll accomplish our objectives with the content that we're creating.
Right. That's right.
That's amazing. Great point, brother. Great point. Well, man, we know that you got some great stuff coming ahead of you. Your best is yet to come, and it's great to meet you. And definitely, we look forward to seeing you grow and watching how successful you're going to make others. Because I just know, man, I see it whenever I met you. The first thing I told her was, I love this guy, man. He's got a heart of gold. He's got that same passion we do, knowing that Zig Ziglar, one of my famous sayings is, you have everything you want in life if you can just help enough others get what they want and need. And I told her, you can tell that guy's got that kind of heart. He's just like, hey, man, let me help you. Anytime anybody's like that, I'm like, I'm all for that guy. I'm going to root. I'm going to cheer him on. So, man, we were like, I'm so happy to meet that guy. So it's great to meet you, and I look forward to your success for sure. Right?
Man, I appreciate that. I appreciate it. And I feel the exact same way. And I love the fact, again, that I got to meet you guys. I appreciate everything that you're saying here. I hope I can live up to everything that you're saying here, because, I mean, that's the goal. And that's the benefit of having a coach, whether it's a life coach, a business coach, a podcast coach. I still have a podcast coach. I just met with him last night. He's holding my hand through this entire rebrand process. So we all still need coaches. And I got to put you on the spot, Mike. I got to ask you a question. Because there's a saying that I've always attributed to Zig Ziglar, and you may or may not be able to confirm this, but you're either wind in my sails or an anchor on my tail. Did Zig Ziglar say that?
Boy, that sounds more like a Jim Rohn, but it might have been Zig. I don't know, but it was either Jim Rohn or Zig Ziglar. It was one of the big ones. I don't know. That's great, man.
I don't mean to call you out, but I had as a Zig Ziglar coach, and like I said, I've always quoted that as a Zig Ziglar quote, but I'm not real sure he actually said it. but it's one of my favorites.
But it may be a Jim Rohn. Both of them, they were so great. So I would have to check that out, brother. That's a great question.
1,000 other Zig Ziglar quotes.
Exactly.
Not ran across that one particular one, or else he would know specifically who it was.
Oh, sure. most definitely. So
still stuff that I'm running through, no doubt. But yeah, I've got a bunch of them because I love to use them when I coach. Anytime you can throw one in and go, you were designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, and endowed with seeds of greatness. Man, don't tell me you're not going anywhere. And they're like, what? I'm like, come on, man, it's Zig Ziglar. Come on, Zig Ziglar. Come on, don't you know that? And they're like, say that again. Designed for accomplishment, man. Come on, engineer for success and endowed with seeds of greatness. Here we go. That's you. So
there it is, man. Get after it.
But Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, I'm a mix of everybody, John Maxwell. And that's why I love the coaching game is it's taking all of them and trying to use it all. And that's really, truly what I do. I'd probably use more Zig than anything just because that was my first influence into this world at 16 of the motivational side. So 32 years when I was exposed to Zig. So I think he's probably top of my list and definitely use him a lot. But, it's just how do you reach somebody? Whatever I can use, whatever that hook is. And it may not be a motivational speaker, maybe a pastor that says something I can use and then turn around and hook you. Whatever I can grab you with and get your attention and go, oh, okay, I got you.
I didn't think about
never heard it put that way before. Let me think about that. All right, yeah.
So you may have hit the nail on the head there because I grew up in a Christian school. I went to a private school my whole life, and it very well could have been a youth pastor that said that to me.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure, but for whatever reason, I wrote Zig Ziglar on that. And I've been carrying it for as far back as I can remember. So
that's right.
There you go. Well, that's awesome. Well, man, we appreciate you being on the show. And the last thing we always say is for our listeners out there, just one nugget of wisdom that you want to leave those folks that are out there listening right now. What would you leave them with?
Oh, man, one nugget of wisdom. And, this kind of goes back to the content that I created just before coming on the podcast with you is that, I'll share it with you on your podcast as well. I had a phone call earlier today I spoke to a gentleman that I met at a business event a couple of weeks back. And this gentleman, he has spent a lot of his life in prison. And now that he's out of prison, he wants to help others that are going through their own trials and tribulations, whether they're addicts or alcoholics or homeless or whatever it may be. But he wants to deliver a message of hope through a podcast. And I thought, man, that sounds tremendous. So in an effort to relate to this gentleman, I shared my story of being in rehab. I'm coming up on 2 weeks now. It'll be my 8-year anniversary. And I shared that story with him of going into rehab. And he stopped the conversation and he goes, do you have any proof? And I'm like, what? You want proof that I was ever an alcoholic?
Right.
So, sitting there, I didn't know whether to take that as an insult or take it as a compliment because I guess he met me in person a couple of weeks ago, and now he's talking to me on the phone, and we've texted a couple of times. So possibly he asked that because he can't envision me being an alcoholic that needed to give 7 weeks of his life to rehab and all the years prior to that and all the damage that I did to relationships and you name it, all those years. But now I'm the guy that appears to have all his stuff together, right? So, I decided to take it as a compliment because although our past doesn't necessarily define us, it definitely shapes us. And I'm very thankful for the shape I'm in today. So there's my nugget of wisdom right there.
That is a good nugget to remember because we always can get stuck in the past and we have to turn about and say, I wouldn't be where I am right now if it wasn't for my past. I wouldn't be able to talk to you as an ex, alcoholic or drug addict or certain things if I hadn't gone through it myself. And I'm sure it was a compliment thinking himself internally, like, well, this is where I am, and you're telling me you were here, and now you're where you are now.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. I mean, you probably opened his eyes just wide open.
Yeah. Yeah. And for all those that are listening, you know, folks like you are the ones that bring the hope and the optimism when there is no hope, when they can look at a Larry Roberts and go, I'm down and out, man. I'm a functioning alcoholic pouring vodka into my coffee in the morning. I'm not going to get away from this, you know, but yet they go, wait a second. How did he do it? I mean, if he can do it, man, there's got to be a way and then that hope is created. And then there's the optimism that comes in and then you can move from that. So for the listeners, I always say, you know, you got to remember where you are today is not where you're going to be in the future unless you do nothing to change your current situation. If we're moving forward, we're going to be in a better spot than we are today. The 1% rule always applies, 1% better each day. And I will get better. It might take me a little while, but before long, I'll start seeing the changes, right? It didn't happen for you overnight, but after a while, you saw the changes. It precipitated all throughout your life, right? And so today you look and go, wow, that was like divine intervention. Here we go, right?
Yeah. And you said 8 years. Is that what you said?
Yeah. November 14th will be 8 years. That was the day that I went into rehab. And it's funny you mentioned divine intervention because I still specifically remember the day that it happened. I had been on about a 2 to 3 week bender. I'd been sitting out of work. How I kept my job, I don't know. Just tremendous relationships and tremendous support that allowed me to stay employed at the time. But I was sitting on, I still have the same couch. Maybe I need to buy a new couch. But anyway, 8 years ago, I was on the same couch. And there's no way that I was cognizant of what was going on. There just wasn't. All I had taken in for days and days, weeks literally, was alcohol and Special K breakfast drinks when I could keep them down. Because that was it. I was just done. And I was sitting there on the couch and just clear as day, a voice in my head said, dude, get on the phone, get some help right now, or tomorrow's not coming.
Right.
You're not, I'll get emotional, but I still can hear the voice and I still see the day. And I reached out to my friend Kenny and I said, Kenny, man, I need some help or this is it, bro. And he jumped into action, grabbed my wife because they worked at the same place. We all three worked at the same place, but me, I'm sitting on the couch drinking instead of working. Grabbed her, went to someone else within the company. And before you know it, they drive home, grab me, and they take me to the facility. And I get to the facility and I don't remember any of this, but I get to the facility and they couldn't stabilize my vital signs. So here's the new guy in rehab getting rushed out on a gurney into an ambulance.
Right.
So they throw me on the gurney. And 4 days later, I wake up in the hospital in McKinney. And I don't know where I'm at, but, it came awful close to taking that very, very, very last drink. And from there, I went back to the facility. I went to Inner Health, which is a facility here in Dallas. It's tremendous. And went there and spent 7 weeks. Was supposed to spend 6, but I remember at the end of that 6th, I was feeling better, but I wasn't quite confident that I could step back out into the world and do what needed to be done in order to maintain the sobriety that I had accomplished within the facility. So I stayed 1 more week. And it took me 7 weeks, but then I came back out and I haven't had a drink since. So
that's awesome.
Congratulations. Now that's out in the country, right? Inner Health?
Yeah, they're outpatient facilities in downtown Dallas, but they're the ranch, as they call it, is up North Texas, just outside of Van Alstyne.
Yes,
just up there. So it's an amazing facility. I was very, and it goes back to being divine intervention of sorts because Inner Health is fairly prestigious rehab facility, and under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have been able to afford to go there.
Right.
But regrettably, my grandmother passed away in 2009, but I didn't know that she had left me everything until 3 years after that. So here we are, 2012. I had just found out that I inherited not a massive amount of money, but a decent amount of money. And that money is what saved my life. That money is what allowed me to go to that facility. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to go there. Now, there might have been another facility that would have stepped up, but that's not how it was intended to be.
That's
And
right.
so it just goes back to the divine intervention of being financially able to support going to a place like Inner Health, as well as the voice that day that spoke to me and got me off the couch and made that phone call.
Yeah.
There's no other way to explain it. Everything
Right.
just lined up in a way that made it possible and made us possible for us to have this conversation today. So
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you talk about it, divine intervention. I just forgot the words. I was trying to mix them
I did
backwards.
too,
but
so don't worry.
definitely, that's what it is. I mean, when there's something happens that you just can't explain and you really, there's not rhyme or reason or whatever. I mean, that's definitely what it is.
When it's bigger
I don't
than
believe
us, right?
I don't believe in coincidences. And so I just believe that's what it is.
Yeah, when it's so
Divine
big,
intervention.
you're like, that can't be human. That has to only can be one thing. That has to be God. And I've been in those situations as well where you just go, the only way that could have been was God. Because I was headed down the pathway as well of alcoholism and all that stuff years ago, and had that same thing where God was like, bro, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I'd gotten out of the fire department and had back surgery. And so I had 6 months to heal up or something like that. So I was like, I'm going to go to motorcycle mechanic school. I'm just going to go totally opposite from my field. Instead of being a firefighter, paramedic, 11 years almost, I'm going to go being a motorcycle mechanic. Yeah, that's my hobby. Yeah. And I was hanging out with some really bad folks, some really crazy people doing some really crazy things. And that just kept precipitating for about the next year and a half. And then all of a sudden, boom, God said, what are you doing? Quit playing on the motorcycles. This is your hobby. This is not what you need to be doing for a living. You need to get your butt back in the hospital, the ambulance and all that, and be a paramedic, because that's what you are. You need to get away from that crowd, because one of the things that we become is the 5 people that we surround ourselves, right? If you're not
100%.
already, you will be. And I was surrounded by a bunch of folks that were not good influences. And it was then, boom, moved out, got back to God, started surrounding myself with folks that were growing. And next thing you know, well, boats rise together sometimes when we surround ourselves with great people. Even if it's not you making it happen, you grab onto those coattails and go, I'm going to ride with you there, Larry. Let me just ride your coattails here. I hang in with you, brother, because I know if I'm one of the 5, here we go. So, but man, I appreciate you being on. Definitely, no doubt, great stuff. I know big things are in your future, and we can't wait to see what happens, brother. So,
And look forward to talking to you again.
Most definitely. Thank you both so much for having me on today. It's been a treat to be here, and I appreciate the invite. And I can't wait to continue to watch each other. You know, we're going to run into each other again. We're kind of running in the same circles these days, so we're going to see each other again. So
Now
I look forward to
your
it.
name.
Absolutely. Well, guys, those are listening right now. I wrap it up with this. Remember, you can have everything you want if you just help enough others get what they want and need. And then lastly, remember the golden rule. If you treat other people like you want to be treated, we'd live in a much better world. Larry, until next time, brother. And for those listening, have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
We want to thank everyone so much for taking the time to listen to the Born to Succeed podcast with Michael and Elisa Merritt. We know that you have a very busy schedule, and we appreciate you taking time out of your day to spend time with us. You can find us at Merritt Coaching Group on YouTube, Facebook. You can email us at merrittcoachinggroup@gmail.com. We want to remind you that you can have everything you want in life if you just help enough others get what they want and need. Remember to follow the golden rule. You can have everything you want. Yeah, but you got to do what? Treat others as you want to be treated. So until next time, have a very blessed day. From Michael and Elisa Merritt.